and overthrowing the elected, vaccinating order through epidemics. It all starts with community, him and her, them and them, you and me. Unity, no party of mine is ever one-sided, but the line outside is so divided.
All right, welcome back everybody to the 2020 Election Day live stream for the Chester County Democratic Committee. I'm your friendly neighborhood Kyle Hudson, and today, right now, we are joined with a really special guest to my heart. We work together. His name is Zach Ging. I have met him actually a couple years ago. He was the intern for the Chester County Democrats, and I brought him on board. We've been working together. He actually does a show called The Situation Room, where they talk about Asian culture, and you guys have had a pretty sharp political focus in your first season. I know you got to sit down with some people involved in the election. So, Zach, what is how are you feeling today with everything that's going on?
I'm trying to stay optimistic. I think that's very important. I don't want to get too ahead of myself, but I'm just kind of holding out hope. I later today, in a couple hours, I'm going to go work the polls. So that would be an interesting experience. I'm excited for. But yeah, we're feeling good overall, but still nervous. We should be. But yeah.
Yeah, I think it's only natural to be a little nervous, but I've been telling people like, look, we've all put in as much time as we can. We've all did everything we literally could, and I'm sure that I'm feeling confident in our chances, but I'm sure that no matter what happens, whatever the outcome is, we're gonna be fine.
Yeah.
We're more organized than we've ever been.
Mhm.
How old are you? How old are you
19.
right now? 19.
Yeah.
So, seeing how engaged your generation is inspiring. I'm 35, right? I'm in the next generation above you, and it's been really awesome seeing the level of engagement from you guys. But one thing I really want to drill down on, because it's something that working with you on your show has been so enlightening to me. You know, we don't really talk about the Asian perspective when it comes to politics.
Mhm.
And I remember, who was the woman you had on who was running in Georgia?
Oh, Michelle Au. Yeah, Dr. Michelle Au is running the Georgia 48th district for state senate.
Yeah, and she was saying how like there were enough Asian folks in that area to be the determining factor of what
Mhm.
goes on.
Yeah,
So
so
how would you suggest that politicians or us as a party better engage with the Asian community?
I mean, the first thing is pretty simple. It's just to acknowledge like that they're there and reach out, because a lot of Asian communities historically, and you could argue up until this election, have never really been felt that a party has reached out to them. This year is interesting because now Asian Americans is the fastest growing voter bloc in America. They make up the margin of error in their voter population in most of the key swing states. So Pennsylvania, Florida, Georgia, even Texas, Michigan, Nevada. So, I think both parties are now understanding the power that the Asian American vote has. But it's important to, not paint the Asian American vote as monolithic. There's over like 20 different subgroups recognized by the census. And so, each community, and even within each community, there's a lot of different varying perspectives because it is also the most socioeconomically diverse group. But now, with this election, it's very interesting because a lot of younger Asian Americans are engaged. Because young people in general, like you said earlier, are very engaged. But there's an extra element to it, I'd say, to 2020.
Now, anyone who knows me knows I worked for Andrew Yang. I was his congressional district leader for our area. And how much do you think his candidacy had to do with how you said that the Asian folks haven't really been engaged before? How much do you think his candidacy had to do with that?
A good bit. So it's interesting because he is the first, Asian American person to be on, what is it, to submit like a legitimate run for the Democratic bid. For like, yeah, I think there was someone who went for the Republican bid a while ago. I can't remember off the top of my head, but yeah, and to see an Asian guy on stage at the debate was incredible, and he had this ability, I think, to organize a lot of ordinary people who don't feel typically engaged, and that's beyond race. And I think that's what made Andrew Yang really special. There were some things that a lot of the Asian American community had taken issues with them, as far as the way he portrayed Asian Americans as like sort of a model minority, the jokes he would make. But I think overall, I know where his heart's at, and I know where the progress he's making is, and I appreciate it.
Well, and I also think we often forget that Kamala Harris is our first Asian American vice presidential candidate. I mean, she doesn't really she didn't draw as much attention to that part of herself as Andrew did, but I think her parents are from India, or correct, or one of her parents. Her mom is from India, and a lot. I wasn't aware. I mean, when people talk about Asians, it's really this thing called the AAPI community. And could you go and explain what the difference is between just saying the blanket term Asians versus the AAPI community?
Of course, yeah. So the AAPI community stands for Asian American Pacific Islander, which is a very big umbrella term that describes people, from with heritage from the Asian continent, which is huge. So what's included in that? You have East Asians like Chinese, Korean, Japanese. I'm Chinese American, but you also have South Asians, which include Indian Americans, Bangladeshi Americans, sometimes Central Asian, which kind of gets a little blurry because a lot of people don't identify within the group sometimes, and then it also includes like the Pacific Islands, which sometimes they don't necessarily identify as Asian. But I think culturally, there's a lot of interaction between like Pacific Island nations and Asian nations just because of the geography. And so, that you're Native Hawaiians, Samoans. So it's a very big umbrella term. And you even have like Southeast Asians, Vietnam, Cambodia.
Now, you said you're 19 years old, and I mean, I must have met you when you were 18, I guess, or probably 7. No, you had to have been 18 because you were working with the party. But what drew you? Like, why do you think your generation is so different from mine when it came to political activism? Because I'll tell you, man, it's not just a N of one, right? Like there are tons of people your age that are engaged in levels that we just don't see typically in youth. Why do you think that is?
I think there's, off the top of my head, there's two aspects, I think. One is like the entrepreneurial spirit is just very strong within like Generation Z. And that's like I think that's very tied to the second part is that the internet and the way the internet has changed our world. All of us grew up from a young age using the internet, so we have a very interesting understanding of it because we don't know, a world without it in a sense. But that also means that we're much more adapted to it, and we understand, the ins and outs more than people who, might be older, right? And the entrepreneurial spirit. The reason I'd say that is because it's a lot of doers, people with ideas that want to make things happen. It doesn't have to be business, but even just organizing people in general, and with the tools of the internet and social media, we have the capacity to do that easily, from anywhere.
As someone who has gotten involved with the party and who has, done stuff, what would you recommend to maybe there's some young person out there that's watching this, they want to get involved, but they don't know how to start. What would you suggest to them?
It is so easy to get involved. You just have to ask someone, and then they'll, because that's the thing people don't understand is like when they think of politics as like this very selective, or even like activism and organizations and getting involved, they think of it as like a selective institution where only like a few people who, you have to be like an Ivy, track or whatever. But it's so easy because, the reality is that we need ordinary people. We always need people to help, right? And so just raising your hand, I don't want to say, I would say how the barriers to entry are very low in a good way because we want everyone to be involved in the process.
Yeah, And one thing I do want to emphasize is that doesn't necessarily mean you have to run for office. I mean, if you want to run for office, that's great. But we need people who are good at math to help be treasurers, and we need people who are really organized to be campaign managers, right? There's a lot more behind that goes on behind the scenes than I think most people realize, and it does take an army if you want to win something like this, right? And a lot of people, especially younger people, may not realize that, especially if you live in Chester County, the way things are now are not how the way things were for a very long time. You know, it was only in the last 4 years that we won our first county-wide seat ever. So like, you know what I mean? So like, it's I think sometimes, especially because I'm a little older than you, right? But I still consider myself young, and you know I think us young people sometimes take things for granted when we haven't seen how bad it can really be, because we have seen a lot of progress. I mean, we're not there yet, but you know we are winning. You know, our ideas. That's why we're called progressives, right? Because we want things to go forward. So, Zach, real quick before you go, you know, who's your who's the local politician that you really look up to the most?
There's two off the top of my head. State Senator Katie Muth of the 44th District, and as well as Chrissy Holohan, our Congresswoman. Katie Muth is incredible. I actually got to know her pretty closely when I worked with her. She has a very tough spirit, and nothing can bring her down. And I really admire that about her. Chrissy Holohan, very qualified. When the thing is, like, when you look at her resume and all the things she's done, you're like, oh my God. And then when you meet her in person, she's just like, to me, I just got the vibe of just like a normal like Chester County mom. So yeah, those are my favorites. I actually have a poster you can't see in the glare, but of both their signs.
Yeah, I've gotten to meet both of them personally, and I mean, they both are really impressive. And actually, I think we're going to have Chrissy on later today. So if you want to catch that interview later on, I know she's very, very busy. But yeah, so stay tuned with that. But Zach, thank you so much, not just for coming on and chatting, but for all the work you've done for the party. We really appreciate it, and I guess we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for having me.